G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags. Today we'll be taking a look at the second of two US premium P-38s, the rare and infamous P-38K. The P-38K was a prototype for a new extremely powerful version of the P-38 developed in late 1942 to mid-1943, or at least the version that we see in War Thunder is. There were actually two P-38K prototypes, and I will come to that a little bit later. The P-38K, at least the version that we see in War Thunder, is based on the airframe that was considered to be the most powerful P-38 airframe ever built. But before we go into that, let's quickly go over the War Thunder stats. In War Thunder, the P-38K comes in at rank 4 battle rating 5.3, and it carries the standard armament all P-38s carry. A single AN M2 20mm cannon with 150 shots, and four 12.7 M2 Brownings with 2,000 rounds between them, or 500 rounds per gun. All weapons, of course, are mounted in the nose as with all P-38s, and this gives the aircraft a respectable 3.58kg per second burst mass. So quickly running over the remaining stats, the max speed in level flight is 724 km an hour at just below 21,000 feet or 6,400 meters. Maximum altitude caps out at 44,000 feet or 13,400 meters, and you can hold a turn in 20 seconds flat. And then there is the climb rate. Now this is probably the most important stat on the P-38K, and I'll explain why in a few moments. However, it comes in at 4,724 feet per minute or 24 meters per second. Okay, with the stat card information out of the way, let's talk a little bit of history. The reason why it's so hard to lock down stats for the P-38K is because there were actually two. Now, the first P-38K was not designed as a prototype for production at all. The first P-38K was actually a P-38E airframe. In fact, it was a training variant that had a two-seat option, known as P-back, that allowed a second person to sit behind the pilot when the plane went up for flights. This training variant was relatively rare, it was unused by the later models, and mainly what this particular version of the P-38K was used for was testing new developments that they were intending to put into later production models. This aircraft tested the intercoolers and at one stage superchargers for the P-38J. It tested new propeller types. If they came up with a new engine cowling shape, they would bang the first prototypes of these engine cowlings onto this aircraft and see just exactly how it performed, not by wind tunnel testing it, but by actually taking it out and flying it. It was quite literally a junker they kept out the back and just kept throwing new ideas at. Now that all changed with the development of the second P-38K, the one that we see here in War Thunder. This was actually designed as a prototype for internal testing by Lockheed, with the intent to prove performance for a potential new model of P-38 following the planned L model that was already preparing to go into production at the time the K was being tested. This second P-38K was based on a J model airframe, which was the most recent of the production aircraft, with the L still in the process of going into production at the time of the testing. And as a result, it has a few drawbacks under the L. For starters, the P-38K has no air brakes, despite being the most powerful variant of the P-38 available. It's fitted with a better intercooler system, it's fitted with a better supercharger system, it's fitted with better propellers. The airframe is polished smooth of rivet heads, and the engines put out a whopping 1,875 horsepower each. But it also carries with it all of the weaknesses of the J airframe. As I mentioned before, no air brakes. The elevator tends to compress at speeds over 750 km per hour, and in War Thunder, it has a chance to structurally fail at any speed beyond 750 km an hour in a dive as well. Although if you're lucky, you can push it out to 800 or just over, but the wings can fall off at any time. And so I'm beginning to move on to my first target in the match. It's a Do 335 Arrow. This is a German heavy fighter, so heavy fighter versus heavy fighter. Now, as you can see, it's clearly making a move on our bomber formation, and I am diving in trying to defend it. That's actually why I was over here. I was trying to give the bombers a little bit of an escort. Unfortunately, the firepower on that thing is immense, and if you let them get close to your bombers, the Lancaster's going to go down in a few moments, and he's already on the B-17, and I'm not going to be able to catch him before he takes the B-17 out as well. But if I can't save them, I can most certainly avenge them. First hit's on. At this point I have all the speed in the world. I am overheating the engines just a little bit, but it's not that bad, and there is my first kill. Now, as you can see, I am overheating all of the engines on the P-38K. It's actually not too much of a worry. As soon as you back the engines off on this thing, they tend to cool. Whenever you use wet for extended periods of time, they will overheat. As soon as you back them off, give them a couple of seconds, as you can see, they're already down to amber, and they'll drop down to white very quickly, even operating on 100%. So, with no bombers left to escort and a second DOE 335 coming in with only one obvious target, me, it's time to start putting this plane's advantages to work. And that main advantage is in fact climb rate. Now, as I said before, it's going to be a very important figure. 4,700 feet a minute may not seem like the ultimate climb rate. In fact, there are many single-engined aircraft that will easily outperform that, at least initially. But that's the thing with the P-38K. It can sustain that over an extended period of time. Generally, an aircraft's climb rate is always highest immediately after takeoff, when the air is at its thickest and the wings are capable of generating the maximum amount of lift. As it slowly gets higher into the sky, the air thins out. Now, this is great for aircraft performance, allowing the aircraft to fly faster, but it lowers the amount of lift being generated off the wings because there's simply less air to push down. This tends to lower the climb rates. The higher you get, the slower you climb, until eventually you reach a maximum altitude. The P-38K can get from the runway start mission to 20,000 feet or 6,100 meters in around 5 minutes or just under. That is a climb rate that even the Spitfires struggle to keep up with. Although they will get the P-38K earlier on as it's leaving the runway, it will just continue to power up and can actually maintain that climb rate to about 25,000 feet before it starts tapering off itself. This is a massive advantage. This is an American aircraft that is completely capable of getting above anybody with no problems at all. But of course that begs the question, why hasn't everybody been screaming about the P-38K being overpowered? Well, it's because of what happens when it gets there. As you saw, as much as the P-38K is powerful, its turning circle is really only that of the equivalent of a DOE 335 once it gets to altitude. Add to that lack of turning circle, its overall acceleration is actually much lower than most single-engine fighters that it will face in its own battle rating at the same altitude. Its top speed is equivalent, but it takes much longer to get there. So while it's capable of being the first aircraft to 20 to 25,000 feet in any given match that it enters, once it actually gets there, if it has to fight somebody at that same altitude, they will be able to outturn it, outrun it, in most cases outgun it, and due to the deficiencies in the J model airframe that the K is based on, they will also be able to outdive it. And this is where the main weakness of the P-38K falls into place and why you don't really see them anywhere. While they are the fastest climbing thing you'll run into, unless they can hold absolute aerial control and keep every single person in the match beneath them, they are very, very easy to push down. They are very easy to kill in a one-on-one fight at an equal energy level. You don't even need an energy advantage over a P-38K to be able to destroy it. It's only good when it has all of the advantages. And all of the advantages is exactly what I do not have in this match. In fact, this team has already failed. I'm one of the last aircraft left alive. The problem was, of course, we had 4 bombers in our team. 3 of them got eliminated in one pass from one arrow, or a second arrow took out the 4th bomber, and that was 4 members of our team down within the first few seconds of the engagement time. However, this doesn't mean I'm not going to go down without a fight. The P-38K has one other interesting thing about it. For an aircraft that's designed to climb so rapidly and so fast, once it gets down on the deck, it's actually surprisingly dangerous. The P-38K's maneuverability and agility is much higher once it gets down towards sea level, and the 2 monstrous engines that it has gives it a hell of a lot of power once it's down there. Add to that the aircraft's incredible climb rate being at its highest point at fairly low altitudes, and what you've got here is an aircraft that can make a very good last stand at low altitude should it lose the altitude advantage. Now I should probably re-emphasize this right here. Should it lose the altitude advantage and last stand. This is a position that you are probably going to die in. This is not a place where the P-38 is going to perform at its optimal level. But I have found in situations where the team has collapsed, you've lost the altitude advantage, you're outnumbered, flying below 5,000 feet, anywhere between sea level and 5,000 feet, seems to be the area where I can draw the most out of the aircraft and usually smack down a few of the enemies before they finally get around to slapping me down. Some poor shooting there. I should have taken that target out straight away, but we use it straight in the vertical, loop over hard, and as you can see the loop speed is incredibly high at this altitude, plane straight back into a dive, I should have retracted the flaps there, break them off, doesn't really matter at this point, execute the aircraft and continue trying to power on, get as much speed as I possibly can to make a run, but it doesn't matter. Focke-Wulf 190D9 comes in and finishes me off. Now, I would have loved to show you some triumphant battles in the P-38K, bringing it through to victory, but unfortunately what you see here is actually a pretty good example of what you face in the aircraft. As a general rule, you manage to take altitude very early on, and you manage to take out one, possibly two aircraft at altitude without too much in the way of issues. But regardless of who you're fighting, whether or not it be the Germans, whether or not it be the British, or it be the Japanese, by the time you've taken out your second aircraft, their planes have started to arrive, and at that point you become rapidly outnumbered. Because there's almost no aircraft on the American team that can match the P-38K in climb rate, except another P-38K, or potentially the premium Spitfire if you're lucky enough to have one around, you tend to be alone at altitude when that happens. The enemy aircraft, of course, are not. They're usually in groups of 3 or 4. At that point, you've really got a choice. You can dive straight at the first one you find and hope to take one out of the head-on before the 3 peel onto your tail faster than you can maneuver and wipe you out. Or you can dive away and try and get to low altitude to survive, surrendering the altitude advantage that you've earned completely. The catch is, of course, by surrendering that altitude advantage, you have also likely just thrown the match, and at that point your team will slowly start to collapse as the enemy team falls down on top of you. And this is really a bit of a disappointment. As many of you know, the P-38K was an aircraft that I had been waiting for the longest time in War Thunder, and when it finally arrived, I was ecstatic to finally see it in my hangar, and well, then it turns out to be an average aircraft at best, with a few outstanding areas, but enough weaknesses that it's very, very easily countered. In many ways, despite the advantages the P-38K does have and its 5.3 battle rating, it is less combat effective than the P-38L that appears at battle rating 4.7. It lacks the boosted control surfaces, it lacks the air brakes. This means that the P-38L actually performs better at higher altitudes than the P-38K does, it just takes longer to get there. And interestingly, this makes it more likely that the P-38L will actually arrive at maximum altitude with a few friends along, as its climb rate is comparable to other US fighters. The P-38K is a fun plane to fly. It's just not a very good one in combat. Its effectiveness within the meta of War Thunder is, well, it's a really odd plane. With a climb rate this high, it should be incredibly powerful within the meta, as the meta is based around climb rate. But the problem is, it just struggles to be able to do anything major once it gets there, especially if it gets outnumbered. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you very much for watching. Remember to click that like button and subscribe if you want to see more on the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.